Welcome to the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. Perryn Keys here with a finally fully recovered Wilson Alexander. Back from his world travels and almost the deathbed. And we're also here with Scott Rabalais, who's got a tea time, obviously, coming up at Wibble Beach maybe in an hour and a half or so. We got to get out of here soon. Yeah?
Wilson and I were talking the other day about we got to play golf again soon.
We do.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay, well, fair enough. I will cheer. I will cheer and sit by and laugh at you guys and hit the reverse thing.
I've never tried to play with someone like on the ropes or anything. You know, watching.
I'll drive the cart. When I used to play golf and shoot 215 on the course, I would always just sit there and throw the thing in reverse in the guy's backswing. So the beat goes off.
Oh,
yeah, we're classy players. That's an insight to the guys I grew up with. Yeah,
nice.
Anyhow, we are not here to discuss golf. We are here to discuss football. I promise. LSU brings in 35 new players. That's the final total. We did the math. We checked the math. I promise that's correct. And so we are here to discuss it all, to discuss LSU's class of 2024, in addition to maybe a little sneak peek at spring football. And at the very end, we're going to discuss, obviously, Nick Saban found a new job. He's not going to be a Walmart greeter down in Jupiter. He's got a pretty high-profile gig. So we will get into all that, but a bit of business here first. If you're watching this or listening, you know already that The Advocate's always been the #1 destination for LSU football coverage. So please subscribe if you haven't already. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Stay up to date with everything LSU, not just football. We've got baseball coming up, obviously, women's basketball, men's basketball well underway, softball coming up, gymnastics in the thick of their season as well. Everything under the sun is going on. And so you need to stay up to date with it with our LSU newsletter. Sign up for the LSU newsletter. You go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. It's a daily newsletter straight to your inbox, 7 days a week, and Rab handles that personally. So support your local journalist. We are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever the finer podcasts are found. But more importantly, we're here live on YouTube every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, but specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. If you don't catch us there live, you can catch us there after the fact on that same channel. And as always, we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. Champion Wealth Strategies is a national financial services firm specializing in the capital markets, securities, insurance, 401ks, and college and retirement planning. Our broker-dealer is LPL Financial Member FINRA, SIPC. As you know, investments are not FDIC insured, may lose value, and have no bank guarantee. But to learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So, gentlemen, signing day, the second signing day has come and passed. Not a lot of drama, which is seeming to be the case more and more now as we go down the road with 2 signing days. The only real thin slice of drama was whether Terry Bussey would sign with LSU or Texas A&M. He chooses Texas A&M. But first things first, let's talk about Dominick McKinley, a 5-star guy who, frankly, they needed to get out of Acadiana High School. And obviously, Brian Kelly addressed that in addition to the story we have from Eric Narcisse at theadvocate.com from the actual signing at Acadiana High School. Wilson, tell us first and foremost, I think if you're an LSU football fan, you probably know this already, but tell us why it was so important to get McKinley, and then also what Brian Kelly is going to do to address the defensive tackle position.
Dominick McKinley is the #1 player in the state, and LSU this whole cycle did a really good job of locking up the top players in Louisiana. Coming out of the December early signing period, it had 11 of the 14 top players in Louisiana signed, but Dominick McKinley was not one of them. And it was sort of this. I think we had this discussion, throughout the fall and especially around the early signing period. Was how you're going to think of this class, and it's like, well, they did a great job, but there would have been a but at the end of that, because you missed out on the #1 player. LSU goes and gets Dominick McKinley, gets him to flip away from Texas A&M. He does so on New Year's Eve. Asked Brian Kelly about that yesterday, kind of what went into being able to get him to flip kind of late in the cycle when he hadn't shown any indication since he committed to Texas A&M in September of doing so. Because Dominick McKinley's, pretty, I think, generally quiet throughout the recruiting process. LSU was basically able to get its foot in the door once Texas A&M started going through a coaching change. And when it did, even though LSU was still about to overhaul its entire defensive staff, they were still able to get in there and be able to make a pitch to Dominick McKinley and his family, who's now playing much closer to home. I think that's something that's probably important to him. It's something he mentioned yesterday. He's only 45 minutes from home now.
That's right.
By going to LSU. And so now LSU's got 12 of the top 14 players in the state signed. That's something that they would like to probably continue to do in Louisiana, especially going into a very strong 2025 class, continue to lock down the state and kind of form Louisiana and like East Texas and Mississippi, and then even getting into occasionally like Georgia and Florida, and some of the other. Really, that's going to be kind of what Brian Kelly mentioned. It makes sense, those border states plus sort of very strong, fertile recruiting ground in Georgia and Florida as kind of the basis and foundation of the program, and then going out to other places like Michigan, for instance, with Bryce Underwood to get your quarterback. Right. And so, McKinley addressed a major need by being able to sort of secure that lockdown of the state. And by also being a defensive tackle, just the position itself that he plays is something else you had to have to get a guy like him who's a consensus 5-star player, number 14 overall in the country, the only 5-star that LSU has in this class. That's the other thing. LSU before this did not have a 5-star in the class. Now it does with Dominick McKinley. It's somebody at a critical position, because as we'll get into a little bit here more in a second, the defensive tackle spot is a weakness. It's just thin right now, and you can't live that way in the SEC. McKinley is someone who, while LSU still needs to continue to do things to fortify that position this upcoming football season, as it continues to build with Bo Davis there at defensive tackle, like Dominick McKinley is the kind of prospect who you can start to build around and build into the future.
Rab, you have a column up at theadvocate.com now about much more of a local flavor on Brian Kelly's sort of revamped defensive staff, but really the staff in full. You've been doing this for a long time, covering LSU for a long time, and you know that has always it's been important. There's a lot of talent in the state, and connections are important, and obviously he spoke to that on Wednesday after McKinley signed.
Yeah, he said it's not a requirement that you have experience recruiting Louisiana, but it's important. And I think he was trying to downplay it a little bit, but it's clearly important. Every member of his staff now is from Louisiana, coached in Louisiana, coached at LSU, or a combination thereof.
Right.
And clearly that's important. I think he's realized after a couple of years. And coming from the Midwest, you understand. And look, at Notre Dame and some of these other schools, you got to recruit, that part of the country. Notre Dame recruits nationally. And LSU, as Wilson said, is going to go after the big player, the quarterback, the difference maker, no matter where they are. And Bryce Underwood's a great example of that. But this is where you have to build the foundation of your team. State of Louisiana, East Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, going to Georgia and Florida a little bit, the Gulf Coast region, basically. And I think he's realized that, and he needs coaches to help him do that. Now, he had guys on his first two staffs that had that experience. Frank Wilson, of course, got him to come back from McNeese. Brad Davis, not Bo Davis. Now we have Brad and Bo Davis. And Joe Sloan and people like that. But now everyone on the defensive staff has got that experience and those connections, and that's I think it's important. I think he has seen the light of something that was lacking on his coaching staff. He doesn't have those connections personally.
Right,
He's not from here. He's not from this region. Never coached anywhere as a head coach except for the Midwest, and so that was vitally important. I think you see it borne out in this class, and I think you're seeing it in the early makings of the 2025 class, where yes, they did go get Bryce Underwood, who's a commitment from Michigan, but they got the number one receiver in the country from East Texas, and the number one running back in the country from Metairie, and players like that. So McKinley was huge from a lot of reasons. It's a position of enormous need for LSU, and it's also a recruit who it sends a signal when he committed initially to Texas A&M. Is like, Brian Kelly's not known as a real good recruiter, and we're seeing that losing the best players. So just from an image standpoint,
almost like a preemptive strike.
The impression of his tenure and his time at LSU and his recruiting, this was huge. I think it's one of the bigger high school recruits that LSU's had in a long time for these multiple reasons.
So we will get to you mentioned the 2025 class. We'll get to that in a moment. LSU finishes with the number 7 class. Could have been higher. and we'll just spend just a minute on this, but could have been higher had they been able to reel in Terry Bussey from Timpson, from East Texas, deep East Texas, athlete who projects. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that Texas A&M in their announcement, they referred to him as a defensive back, which is a place that obviously LSU needs a little bit more stability in. They thought that they were in the mix for him, but it seemed like getting a little bit closer towards signing day that he was more likely to stay with Texas A&M than go to LSU. Certainly they made a charge for him.
Oh, definitely. LSU had Terry Bussey on campus about a week ago or so. He made a string of visits going into signing day, essentially going from Georgia to LSU and then back to Texas A&M. And it felt like kind of down the stretch it was really a two team race between LSU and Texas A&M. But LSU was always having to sort of play catch up. It's harder to convince someone to change their mind, once he's already committed to Texas A&M. Back in September 28th, he committed to Texas A&M. And so LSU was trying to have to get him away from that. And there was an opening, again, with very similar to Dominick McKinley with Texas A&M went through the coaching change.
I was going to say your story had, that's up at theadvocate.com about how they did it 4 times with Texas A&M targets.
Exactly. I mean, this was LSU, a strong part of this class, a theme of this class, I guess, is, you have Dominick McKinley, Cohen Eccles, Weston Davis, and Gabe Relaford, who were all one-time Texas A&M commitments, ending up at LSU. Bussey would have been the 5th. But, sometimes this is going to happen in recruiting, especially because Bussey had, like we said, already committed to Texas A&M over LSU and others. If he had been uncommitted, maybe this was a different story. Maybe the LSU ends up with him going into this signing day if he'd been uncommitted. But it was going to be hard to probably get him to change his mind. I think LSU certainly gave it a really good effort, but and you would have liked to, if you're LSU and you're an LSU fan, you would have liked to have seen that happen. But was probably always more likely to be able to flip Dominick McKinley than it was Terry Bussey. And so, LSU doesn't get him. It was kind of wild. Like you mentioned, signing day and drama that does no longer happens in signing day. This was the one major recruit left out there who had yet to really, even though he was committed, finalize that decision going into signing day. That was it. Yeah. And his announcement lasted about 5 minutes. Yeah. His announcement lasted 5 minutes. His coach said a few words. And Terry goes, for the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be playing at Texas A&M. And then that was it.
Pretty much dropped the mic and
amen.
hit the road.
He didn't have any props. It wasn't some long drawing out thing. He just sort of said it very plainly, and that was it.
He didn't have a puppy collie or anything like that.
No.
Who was the? I know
Isaiah Crowell.
That's it, Crowell, who had the baby bulldog.
Yeah.
That was pretty clever. I got to admit.
Days gone
I don't go on
by.
a lot of those recruiting signing day theatrics, but that one was pretty.
Days gone
pretty
by
good.
on signing.
I was
day.
always waiting for an Alabama recruit to somehow have a live elephant.
I would have. Now look, I don't have a lot of money in the bank saved up, but I would have emptied out the account to have seen that one, especially if you could have gotten Nick Saban to show up there or something like that, maybe ride the elephant.
An elephant would have been scarier.
Yeah, that's exactly it. No buffaloes allowed. So anyway, Kelly finishes with the number 7. Listen, during the season, I think that was a lot of talk. There was a lot of talk of that, rightly so. Wait a minute. Just as you referred to, Rad, wait a minute. These guys are hovering around 11, 13, 12. I don't know. This doesn't look like it's up to snuff, up to par with a particular, with a typical LSU signing class. They wind up with the number 7 class. They miss out on Terry Bussey, but they have 6 DBs, 4 corners, 2 safeties. Am I getting that right? I might actually be more than that.
4 safeties.
4 safeties and 4 corners.
Oh, gosh.
No,
it's only 2 safeties.
2 safeties.
2 safeties and 4 corners.
And the high school class.
Okay.
That's
it. I'm sorry.
Okay,
With the
we're
2
considering
transfers.
transfers as well. Yeah, two transfer safeties.
But so they obviously loaded up on DBs. They loaded up on linebackers.
Offensive linemen.
Offensive linemen. They got 6 in the class, and so this is a pretty full class. We will get to sort of needs and who may contribute right away in a moment. But they finished with the number 7 class. And now, just as you referred to, Rab, the 2025 class is we're a good ways away. They're number 2 rated now. Notre Dame's ahead of them, but that may have to do with Notre Dame's got, I think, 13 commitments, and LSU only has I don't know, 7 or 9 or
It's about
something like
7.
that.
Yeah.
And so they're number 2 overall, but certainly they've got some. This could be a blockbuster class, as you referred to, Rab, and as you know, Wilson. They've got, look, the accusation, if you will, was that these guys maybe wouldn't be up to the same level in terms of recruiting as some previous LSU staffs under Nick Saban, under Les Miles, under Orgeron. And so, well, they've answered, and they've answered with vigor, I would say. The number 1 quarterback, the number 1 running back, the number 1 wide receiver in the class of 2025.
As well as Devin Harper, who's the number 2 player in Louisiana,
That was a big
4-star
commitment
offensive
last
lineman.
week?
Yeah, I can't remember the January 30th. So yeah,
So pretty close, yes. So, it's quite a
and
response.
Jabari Antoine,
Yeah.
who's major cornerback recruit who they already got. I mean, they're loading up in that class at the moment. They still don't have a whole bunch of like defensive linemen, which I think we'll get to here in a second. Is still like we haven't really fully dove into like how much of a need that is and how LSU might go about addressing it. But that is a class that's starting to come together that looks really strong.
And it's supposed to be a good year in Louisiana. This
right.
recruiting cycle. I don't think it's full of defensive linemen. To Brian Kelly, to what he said to us on Wednesday, they have to go out of the state and out of this region for difference makers, and that could definitely be the case at that position. But they're off to a flying start, and it's a long way to go. You got to keep these kids committed and get them to sign and get them all the way to the December signing date. But it's a good start,
right? Wouldn't you say over the past 2.5 months, that narrative did a complete 180 from, boy, I don't know if these guys have what it takes to be elite recruiters, to holy cow, these guys finished with a top 10 class this year, and now this one coming up the line looks like it's going to be a blockbuster class.
It does, and they're starting to do some good things in 2026 as you see this new staff that's come in is kind of getting out onto the trail very early with that group too. They put such an, I think with this staff put quite the emphasis on recruiting and talent development and all those things, which is, I mean, you're going to try to do that with any class, but it didn't seem as much like, it seemed like that was like a theme with every coach. And like we talked about with so many of them having Louisiana ties, like bringing in people, all of them having some kind of Louisiana tie, bringing in people who are going to be able to recruit this area and take advantage of some strong, talent pools who are coming up through the state. But back, you asked earlier about defensive tackle.
Yes.
And so kind of circling back to that, we asked Brian Kelly about that yesterday. Basically, he acknowledged that they still have some needs, and especially at the defensive tackle position. As we've gone over before, they thought that retention was going to be the way they were going to go this year, that they were going to be able to keep like Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, maybe both, at least one of them. That didn't happen. And so now, LSU's really in a tough spot. They've got 5 defensive tackles on the roster, 5 true defensive tackles, and with McKinley now officially on there. 3 of them were just signed in this class. So 2 of them are freshmen, McKinley and Demirion Johnson. Tough to know if you can rely on a freshman at a position like that right away.
Right.
One of them is a junior college transfer, Sean Washington, who's not proven at this level. He got started his career at Georgia, but then with the junior college route and came to LSU in this cycle. And then 2 returning scholarship defensive tackles in Jalen Lee and Jacobian Guillory, neither of whom are proven difference makers on this level. And so that's the situation that LSU's in right now. It's you don't want to start like necessarily peddling pessimism, however many months we are out from the season, but like this is a major concern at the moment, and LSU's got to figure out something to do about it.
So 2 things. I'm sorry, two things to that end, though. Brian Kelly did, if I'm not mistaken, he did address that and say, okay, look, in the spring, we're probably, he didn't reveal any names, but hey, we're going to take a look at some guys, move them around, maybe move somebody from offensive line or defensive end, something like that. And then also, I know he didn't address this, and he couldn't address this probably, but listen, you bring in Bo Davis, known as an elite recruiter, just came from Texas, a lot of ties. Great, thought of as a great teacher. I would say it's overwhelmingly more likely than unlikely that he will find somebody post-spring to reel in to bring to campus.
That's the hope at this point. But traditionally your kind of recruits like that who you think maybe can come in and make an instant impact. And the thing is, they don't necessarily need like the number one defensive tackle in the portal.
They need guys.
They while it would be nice, like they got Jordan Jefferson from West Virginia last year, who ended up being probably their best defensive tackle down the stretch. If they can go and find someone like that, who nobody around here, other than the fact that his name was Jordan Jefferson, had ever heard of him, before LSU got him out of the transfer portal, but he ends up, being able to show that he can play in the SEC. He has a good season. Like, you need to go and find probably people like that, because that's probably the kind of folks who are going to be available.
Right.
Like, everybody and their mother is going to be going after the number one defensive tackle in the portal, whoever that ends up being coming out of the spring. And so while if you're LSU, you should be able to compete for those kinds of players. What might be more realistic is getting, someone like a Jordan Jefferson to come in again, or even like a Mekhi Wingo when he transferred from Missouri.
That's right.
An all SEC guy, a freshman all SEC kind of player at the time, but not someone who anybody around here had ever heard of. Didn't have that kind of name
Certainly
recognition like a Walter Nolan when he was
Right.
transferring out of Texas A&M and now ends up at Ole Miss. But he ends up obviously having playing really good football here, especially when he was healthy. And so if LSU can find someone like that in the second spring portal window, great, fantastic. But it's we don't know exactly what's going to come out of that second portal window. It seems like people are talking about like maybe right now that second portal window is going to be more active than it has been in years past, because usually the first one is the one that's much more active. This one, after a whole lot of like late coaching changes at major programs, Alabama, and then all the ripple effects from that, maybe there will be more in the second portal window. But yeah, LSU is going to have to look at what's available there, and it's going to be really interesting to see who they move over from the offensive line to the defensive line during spring. I don't know who that would be off the top of my head. So obviously it would be one of your backups. It's not like no starters are getting moved from the offensive to the defensive line. Maybe it's like Kimo Makaniole or someone who's kind of been on the depth chart. Maybe probably one of your guards, not necessarily a tackle, because they're probably built a little bit better to play offense. He's played defensive tackle. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Brian Kelly said that they were going to change some positions, and we'll see who ends up being here in the spring. And it would also be really interesting because the question that he got yesterday was about cross training defensive ends. But then he ends up taking it into that direction of offensive linemen. So, but cross-training defensive ends might still be something that they consider doing. A guy like Paris Shand has experience kind of playing that three technique defensive tackle, which is one of the things they're certainly looking for. He feels more comfortable rushing from the edge, but that might be something that he is capable of doing. They've got a few edge players now.
Right.
Gabe Relaford, a freshman, might even be capable of playing that sort of inside shade defensive tackle spot on occasion, even though he's listed at defensive end. So we'll see if they end up doing that in the spring. But that's their options. It's go in the portal and find somebody there, like we're saying. It's maybe there's some solutions on your roster at the moment if you move some guys around. The other thing would be, like a junior college guy like Jalil Muhammad. He's a junior college guy they recently extended a scholarship offer to, and we'll see what happens with that down the road. He's at Garden City Community College, so that's the route that you're having to take here. But it was interesting. Brian Kelly saying like they're still recruiting at that position, and so we'll see what comes out of it, because it is, as we said, an enormous need that this team has to address. It's like almost like last year, it was like around this time, everyone's talking corner. What are you going to do about corner? This year, that position that is making you kind of scratch your head is defensive tackle.
Right. There are no, to your point, there are no Walter Nolans out there right now. We don't.
And that's the other thing to note, is that nobody will be allowed to transfer within the SEC in the spring portal window.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Because you had to have done that by February 1st.
Yeah. So you're going to have to go. You're going to have to go elsewhere. This is the LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the journalists at The Advocate, NOLA.com, and the Times-Picayune. You know where to find all our writers' great work. That's at theadvocate.com, or NOLA.com. Please subscribe, whether that's print or digital. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. And as we say, there's every sport going on underneath the sun right now at LSU. Once they get into spring practice, that'll mean football, baseball, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, gymnastics, and whatever else, track as well. So stay up to date with everything with our LSU newsletter. Please go to theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter to sign up there. We are here every Monday and Thursday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And if you don't catch us there, matter of fact, please, by all means, check us out on YouTube. We are there live every Monday and Thursday on all our social channels, but specifically the YouTube channel, LSU Tigers on NOLA.com. You catch us there live. You don't catch us there live, you can catch us there after the fact. And we are brought to you every Monday and Thursday by Champion Wealth Strategies. To learn more, go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. So we discussed needs, obviously, DT being the overwhelming need for LSU right now, which is going to be, actually, we haven't discussed this part where they're going to have to do a little bit of roster management too, because they're like 88 scholarships or something like that. So
88 or 89.
They're going to have to sift their way. We will probably see some departures after spring ball and all that. But elsewhere, in terms of this 2024 recruiting class, Rab, I'll put you on the spot. Aside from the obvious, which is defensive tackle, whom do you think might have a chance to maybe not be a starter right away, but certainly make a significant contribution to the LSU roster? See, so it's just you're putting on your reading glasses as proof you've been covering LSU since 1911, like we say.
That's the single wing
You're
days.
wearing glasses.
That's not important. We don't need to talk about that. We don't need to talk about that they're progressives too.
I think certainly these receivers. Obviously, you're losing some big names in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. So
the transfer receivers specifically.
Brian Kelly talked Wednesday about the production that C.J. Daniels had at Liberty and Xavier Thomas, transfer from Mississippi State, had. And of course, you got some freshman wide receivers as well. And and you have guys on the roster. You have Kyron Lacey is back, and he looks like he's going to be the number one guy.
Or CJ.
Or CJ, he may very well be the number one.
But there's our opportunity and need for them to have production out of these new guys. It's gonna have to come from somewhere. So I would say these transfer wide receivers are the big ones, because the offenses. We all anticipate, even with their, I at least I do, even with their issues at defensive tackle, the defense, you have to think is going to be somewhat better, and they're going to
almost can't help but be
almost
better.
Can't help it, and you have to think the offense is going to be not quite as productive. To expect them to have the number one ranked offense in the country again is also not realistic, but they'll still be really good if they can get the production out of some of these players. So I'm looking at the wide receiver spots for sure.
I will throw one out to you and just see what you have what your thoughts on it what your thoughts on it are.
Yeah, we can talk.
Suddenly can't speak English. This is why we're all writers by trade. I don't think this young man is going to be a starter, but I do think that he's got a tremendous capability to be able to be a contributor right away, and that's tight end Trey'Dez Green.
Yeah, it'll be interesting with Trey'Dez because he played essentially wide receiver his senior year at Zachary, and he's going to have to learn kind of the complete and total tight end position at LSU. But he could probably, if he's on the field early, it's as a pass catcher, and it's as that mismatch that he provided on the outside as a guy who's 6'7", can run and who can jump out the gym. He's a great basketball player. As well during his high school career. He's somebody who, he really made a leap in the final recruiting rankings. He got up, I think, into the top 40. And he's a fascinating kind of mismatch opportunity on the outside. And so while he's probably not, your starting tight end, is he your number 2 or your number 3? In certain situations, that's a possibility. LSU's bringing back, Mason Taylor's their starting tight end. But Mac Markway and Trey'Dez and Kamorian Pimpton are kind of in that group together, as your potential number 2. And especially because it's going to be interesting to see if LSU does the more of the multi-tight end sets that have been hallmarks of the Brian Kelly offense before. Obviously, now you have a new play caller in Joe Sloan, but schematically, the offense isn't expected to look all that different. And I don't think the playbook is going to get completely changed. But but because especially now you're talking about Garrett Nussmeier as opposed to Jaden Daniels, and Garrett Nussmeier's outlet being more probably the tight end, whereas Jaden Daniels' outlet last year was him scrambling. Exactly. We saw that in the bowl game. That might really be a preview of what Mason Taylor's usage could be next year. He had like 7 catches for 88 yards. And then maybe you're getting more out of the tight end position. And so that would be an interesting one. Some of the other ones I think that you might see early in some capacity, at least maybe like on the 2 deep, would be like a Deshaun McBride and Joel Rogers, the 2 freshman safeties. Brian Kelly talked their ability yesterday because he was asked about Jordan Gilbert, and he said how Jordan, the transfer from Texas A&M, somebody who they brought in to be one of their starting safeties, but he was like he kept saying the caveat to this is that they really like their young safeties who came in this class, and that Deshaun was the third highest rated player in this class from LSU that LSU signed. Joel Rogers is another 4-star safety. These are some guys who maybe can crack the 2 deep. They're going to have competition, with Ryan Yates and Jordan Allen and some of those guys who are still on the, already coming back on the roster. But I think those could be an interesting one. Another one who I think could get on the field early is Caden Durham in some capacity. LSU doesn't have a whole lot of running backs like it did last year, so there's going to be available touches. You would still expect, Caleb Jackson, Josh Williams, I think, to be the kind of the 1-2 at running back. But I think LSU's only got the 4 scholarship running backs with those two, Trey Holly and Caden Durham. And so Caden's going to have a chance, I think, to get on the field there in some capacity, maybe get a few touches here and there. And because running back is the kind of position where you can get on the field as a freshman usually.
Is that some position that they could look to in the second portal window, you think, as well?
Maybe, but I don't.
They could use one more. One more running back would be.
Yeah, but again, it's sort of like.
Honestly, how many? I'm sorry, Wilson. How many? After Diggs and Williams, how many running backs did they? They used Kane a little bit, but as long as you got 4, maybe 5,
but
probably okay.
Jaden Daniels rushed for 1,000 yards last year. You're not going to get that out of the quarterback position this year, so you're going to have to spread the carries around to more guys.
That's why I'm buying all the Caleb Jackson stock in the world right now. If you can get it.
I would buy him on the first 2 downs and probably Josh Williams on 3rd down with a little bit of the other guys mixed in.
And we'll see. I mean, in that scenario, you are counting on Caleb Jackson being able to be a complete 3-down running back, which he was not as a freshman. We saw those growing pains that are very natural at that age. I could. The problem to me with bringing in a 5th running back is it's going to have to be someone who. Really like the evaluation and, who makes sense to add to the roster. Because like we said, they're over the 85. And so if you're already having to whittle down at some point and in some form or fashion, if you're adding more players, you got to like them better than what's currently on your roster and and trust them instead of just developing what's currently on the roster. Because LSU's also going to bring in at least 1 running back in the 2025 class, if not 2. So they are
and not just a schmuck either.
Exactly. And so it's like maybe you try to get through this season with 4, knowing that going into 2025, like the only person you're going to lose is Josh Williams.
Your analyst acumen is very good, but I think they need more. I think they need more running back. Look at last year. Like I said, Jaden Daniels rushes for 1,000 yards, but John Emery. You rarely get a contribution from him.
And then you got
Trey Bradford. They were down 2 or 3 running backs a lot last year. Yeah. I don't think 4 cuts it. I know, as you said, Perryn, they're in a bit of a fix, not a small one, not a huge roster management problem, but a bit of a fix that you got to whittle down a little bit. And we're talking about adding another player, but I want another running back if I'm Brian Kelly in the transfer portal. And I'm curious to see what you think. And we have a very small sample size seeing Joe Sloan call plays in the bowl game against Wisconsin, but he seemed to like the ball control kind of pass. He seemed to like the short passes in the flat, and that's what I want to see to a tight end. Give me a curl route with Mason Taylor or Trey'Dez Green or something like that. Just go. It's 3rd and 5. Just go 7 yards and get the first down. Put the linebacker or the safety on your back where they can't get to the ball. The Saints drove me crazy last year. I know we're going to talk about the Saints, but they threw 3rd and short, and they're throwing the ball way down the field on a fade route. Something like that. Just move the chains. It seemed to me that Joe Sloan liked, or maybe under Brian Kelly's direction, liked those kinds of plays. I don't know if you got that impression from the bowl game.
I mean, the only thing that really comes to mind is, seeing, like we were talking about with Mason Taylor being an outlet on underneath and intermediate stuff. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Yeah, because Nussmeier is going to throw those passes instead of running for the first down.
That's,
absolutely.
That's part of the reason why. I'm sorry, but that's part of the reason why I think Trey'Dez Green may make an impact. Again, not be a starter, but make it have potential to make an impact early. What do we know about, you guys remember Jimmy Graham, you remember Antonio Gates, you remember Tony Gonzalez, all these ex-basketball players. Trey'Dez was a great basketball player at East Feliciana before he transferred to Zachary. So you got a guy who knows how to be physical and, for lack of a better way to put it, knows how to sort of, play and compete with a body going up against them. Knows how to post up, so to speak.
That was something talking to high school coaches back in December about Trey'Dez. First story we did then was they didn't expect him to be as physical as he was.
Yeah,
and he was. For someone who was primarily kind of playing outside as a receiver, he brought that to the game. And
maybe I'm influenced by his highlights. Just watching him. I know SEC is not high school, but he's just like going up. I'm up here getting the ball, and you can't do anything about it.
Marcus Spears was a tight end at Southern Lab all those years ago, and they every once in a while they would split him out too because, like, I mean, and I grant you that was at 1A level, but you imagine being some poor 5'6", 146-pound kid seeing that man-child coming after you. So anyway, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get a sidetrack. It is an interesting point you bring up though about running back, which is, hey, maybe you're one. God bless. Let's hope this doesn't happen to anybody, but you might only be 1 or 2 ACLs away from all of a sudden, you find yourself in serious trouble. So if that's the case, then that means they're going to have to sort of manage 6 or 7 players maybe out of the program, in addition to be in order to be able to bring in not only defensive tackle but maybe some other area need. So anyway,
in terms of your sort of passing game concept question, I think there was like a good balance in the bowl game. This is just kind of trying to remember, something that happened over a month ago of sort of, passing of like route depths. I think there was a good balance of that, of like the deep ball with, short stuff and intermediate, routes. And it felt like there was anyway a good balance of that. And so I would expect that to continue. And like you said, with those short passes to tight ends and running backs being more of your third down outlet, or even just your short intermediate outlet on any down as compared to, Jaden's legs.
So we have seen the roster now is about as set as it can possibly be for spring practice. Spring practice begins March 5th. Spring game will be April 13th, as Brian Kelly mentioned, Wednesday, with a spring break sprinkled in there in between on purpose because coaches can continue to work with players, meet with them, and break down stuff and all that. And that doesn't count toward your 15 practices. Rab, I would put this to you since, as we say, you've been watching LSU football and watching a lot of spring practice since 1911. You remember when Doc Fenton was, he had a standout spring in 1909, and that really turned the corner.
Doc, that was his last year, 1909. He was gone by the time I started covering LSU. I wasn't
there like you were, so I get the years mixed up. I got to go on research. Gosh. No, in all seriousness, with a new
you're working on 100 years of Tiger Stadium book, and you've seen all of them.
That's right. Yeah, it's been great.
That's right.
You and Ted Castillo side by side. I'm sorry, that's an inside joke for too many people. But in all seriousness, Rab, with an entirely new defensive staff, you've seen plenty of coaching turnover in your day. What do you want to see out of spring ball? To the extent that we're going to see, we don't know how much we're going to be able to view, but what do you want to see out of that defensive staff and just sort of, the first steps between the players and coaches and getting those guys to improve and, do some install?
Yeah, I want to see, the ability to pressure the quarterback. That'll be a big one. Rushing with the front four. Which, again, they're not tackling the quarterbacks or anything like that.
Right.
But blowing up those plays where it makes the referee blow the whistle, and I want to see them not let receivers run amok. In the secondary, some improvement, some spark of inspiration that okay, it's not going to be that bad this year. That they're actually going to be able to cover people part of the time,
right?
Not just let people just run wild. Wisconsin had 500-something yards of offense in the LSU game.
Was it that much?
It was a season high for
them.
It
was definitely
I know it was a season high for the Badgers, but
just those are the big things. I think the linebacker position with Perkins and Penn is in a good spot, but you gotta be able to rush with 4. And to help you cover with more guys and then got to cover the guys. So I'd like to see some indication that I don't think LSU, again, as I've said many times, LSU's secondary this past year was not the secondary of 2019 with Derek Stingley and Christian Fulton and Grant Delpit. But it has to be some technique. It's got to be a combination thereof. It's mostly players, but technique also plays a part. So I want to see that they're playing better technique, more press coverage, whatever it is that shows that they can cover some people and disrupt the passing game.
Teach tackling.
Yeah.
Boy. That's one good place to start.
In all seriousness, the myriad issues that the defense had, defensive linemen lining up a yard off the line of scrimmage and, defensive backs out of position, you sort of forget, oh, wait, that's right. It's a blocking and tackling game. And they far too
Michigan
many tackles.
blocked and tackled teams to death last year.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Fundamental team.
Just, and tackling is two things. It's pursuit and it's tackling once you actually are, at the ball carrier.
'cause the
And
run
LSU
fits-
did, with the pursuit angles last year, especially in the secondary, were abysmal at times. And so work on your pursuit work on pursuit and work on tackling. And I mean, those are the fundamental things that often get done in spring in particular. And it's like, out of the defensive staff, that's the one I want to, it's going to be hard to tell in the spring if it's actually getting any better, but that's what I would like to see is some indication that those fundamental things, tackling and pursuit angles, have improved. Because if they have, then yes, the defense can get better.
It was hard to tell last year in preseason practice or in the spring because they had so many weapons, and it turned out they had the number one offense in the country, and the Heisman Trophy winner playing quarterback. But you were kind of like, bells are going off. It's like they should be able to do something once in a while. So you'll be able to tell somewhat. But some people watching this may say, they just follow the ball. What is so important about blocking and tackling? That it's the skill players that you pay attention to. To me, this has always been the basis of why has the SEC been so dominant over the last 20 years is because they've been so great in the trenches, especially on the defensive line.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
great teams, the national championship teams from Florida and LSU and Auburn the year they won. Yes, they had Cam Newton, but they had a great defensive line. And Alabama and Georgia in recent years, they've been dominant in the trenches, and you have to have that. You have to have, and Michigan, they weren't flashy on offense this year, but didn't they have one game where they threw like one pass in the second half or something?
They ran
Against Penn
32
State,
times in
yeah.
a row against Penn State.
Yeah. They weren't flashy on offense, but they went 15-0.
Right.
And a lot of the reasons Wilson has described.
Which incidentally was what I always thought that Jim Harbaugh wanted to do. He was kind of a line of scrimmage coach when he at San Diego, Stanford, and then even with the 49ers. You remember Alex Smith and Kaepernick both running, old-fashioned quarterback sweeps like it was 1959 or whatever. I mean, that was what he always sort of wanted to do. I never understood really why I got away from that, but he certainly returned to it the past couple of years with great success, and now he's off in San Diego. He's not in San Diego. He's in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Excuse me.
I wish they were in San Diego.
Speaking of former coaches who had a lot of success in college and then went off to the pros, there is a recent retiree who has decided to come out of retirement. Nick Saban is joining College GameDay, the set of College GameDay. Rab, I did just want to wrap up with that and get your thoughts on it. I'm only speaking for myself, but I can't wait to see that. I frankly have not. That used to be, as you all know and remember, that was appointment viewing, if ever there was appointment viewing when it came to college football. College GameDay was the heartbeat of college football. I don't want to overstate it, but it really, really was. And maybe it's just me. Maybe it's a function of me getting older. It no longer became appointment viewing. I'm not going to say that I'm going to set my DVR and going to set an alarm and make sure I get up and see every minute of it. But I think Nick Saban's going to be outstanding on that panel.
I think he's. Yeah, say what you want about Nick Saban, and obviously a lot of people have negative feelings about him in the LSU fan base, but because of all the torment he caused them over the years. But whenever he says something, when he was here, in his time at Alabama, when he's done these little stints,
I learned something from every press conference.
You learn something every single time. He always has something compelling to say, and I'm getting older. I'm no Pat McAfee fan. I think GameDay has become too much of a clown show, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And now that having been said, I would start a GoFundMe account to see Nick Saban put on a mascot headgear.
I think that'll be McAfee.
And we were kind of wondering when the announcement came out yesterday for half a minute. It's like, does this mean Lee Corso's not coming? And they made a point to say Lee Corso is still going to be part of the
and made a
crew.
point to say McAfee was going to be part of it too.
Yes.
And I think that was part of it. I mean, looking back on it, it's easy to say this now, but looking back on it, maybe Nick had this idea in the back of his head anyway. He doesn't have to, mess with any more media obligations than he wanted to when he was at Alabama. And now all of a sudden he does a 15, 20-minute hit once a week on the Pat McAfee show, which is what he did last football season. It struck me as odd, and I guess it's not surprising that McAfee would stay given that. But maybe I'm showing my age too. I'd love if Pat McAfee took a long walk off of the set and never returned.
Nick, look, he's fully invested in college football. Obviously, he spent his whole life in football. mostly in the college ranks, and I think he cares about the game, and he's interested in what's going on and what's happening, and his insights are going to be fascinating to hear. And maybe it won't quite be the same since he's not coaching. Now he's going to be a former coach, but I think he's going to be one of those guys. I think of someone like Ara Parseghian after he retired and went into television. You were always interested in what Ara Parseghian had to say, and I think John Madden maybe on the NFL side, but I think Nick will be a very good. I'm glad to see it. I like too. you. I'm eager to see what he does. And Baby Felice says, "You want to put the headgear on, Nick?" No, mess up your hair.
Nick will just scowl at him. No, but I mean, we also, the other thing, one more thing just in closing, is that we know, if there's one thing we know about Nick Saban, I don't care if he's 72 or 52 or 32 and or what job he's doing, he's going to take it seriously. He's going to put in the work to do it and make sure that he's prepared. Absolutely. And he's going to execute very well on that job. And it's, however you slice it, it's still a whole hell of a lot less stressful than the job he just left, and certainly less of a time crunch, because I do think Miss Terry, I think her whole MO was, let's get to Jupiter Island. We're not going to spend a whole lot more time doing much else. And this allows him to continue to do that. Live in Jupiter Island and then, fly off to, Eugene or wherever College Game Day is going to be. So anyway.
Be interesting if he comes to Baton Rouge, won't it?
Well, it will not have been the first time he's come to Baton Rouge, certainly, but it's certainly.
No, in that capacity,
he's been in the Superdome, too. He was certainly in the Superdome in January 2020.
No, if he's on that stage in the quad or on the parade grounds or something like that.
Don't you think the venom will kind of disappear a little bit? People might be a little bit more inclined to poke fun at him instead of screaming at him. Does that make sense? Talking trash to him almost, but in a friendly way instead of, "You evil SOB, I can't wait to..."
You'll probably still get some of that. What would be the game this fall if LSU gets one where Game Day would come? Would it be Bama?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely.
The home schedule is so compelling that I think you could probably choose a few different ones as a potential Game Day landing spot. But
I was going to say Oklahoma,
but
it's the last game of the year, and that's Iron Bowl week. That's the Michigan Ohio State game. They're usually at one of those places. But yeah, I want Nick Saban on that. I want Nick Saban on that
LSU
campus.
Ole Miss could be.
We're gonna have to go cover that, or we'll send Koki. Koki's a good scout.
LSU Ole Miss could be an option too. I think
that's true.
If Ole Miss is as good as they're supposed to be next year, and LSU's good too, and everything, then that could be another top 10 matchup in October.
I hear what you're saying about people still going to give Nick a hard time. I think. And maybe I'm totally wrong. I think the respect for Saban is going to come through very quickly. He'll still get some boos and some cat calls or something like that. But I think the respect for him will come through very quickly. And say they honor the 25th anniversary in a few years. They honor the 25th anniversary of the 2003 team. They're on the field, and he comes for that. I think people he'll get a lot of cheers. I think I may be wrong, but I think that's going to happen.
I think so too. I think the right word there was respect. And yes, you're right. I mean, he's still going to get some choice words from some choice people, but I think the level of respect for what he accomplished as a coach, even at Alabama, but also what he did in terms of laying the foundation for LSU to be this powerhouse over the past 25 years, and then also just from the simple notion of, okay, if I were an LSU football fan, this guy is not wrecking my season now. He's not wrecking my team and its chances to win a championship. So it's okay for me to respect him again or cheer for him again or just straight up listen to his insights. So anyway, we've gone way too long. Rab, you have a tea time. Are you going to Torrey Pines or where were you headed?
I've played Torrey Pines.
Have you really?
I did, yeah.
Oh, you SOB. I'm going to start spewing venomous words at you like all the other LSU fans and Nick Saban. That's unfortunate.
That's not the best place I've played, but it's
really.
You
got to play Augusta.
National.
Now I'm really I
shot
hurt.
106.
Perryn, you can't hit the reverse button on the card at Augusta National.
They frown on that in Augusta.
There's no carts anyway.
We did not take carts. We had to walk.
Oh, I'll bring an air horn. How's that?
You will get promptly dismissed.
That
my
would be a
farewell
popular
performance. We better wrap this up.
Hey, real quick, who's going to win the Super Bowl? Who's going to win the Super Bowl?
Yeah, the NFL is winning this Super Bowl. Yeah,
I know the Chiefs are an underdog. I'm not betting, but I wouldn't bet against the Chiefs.
I wouldn't bet against Patrick Mahomes as an underdog. Maybe Patrick Mahomes at all.
No.
Even though they did lose the game to the Bucs in the Super Bowl a few years ago. We better wrap this up.
Here's the final score.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Chiefs 13, 49ers 10. Here's the headline the next day. Chiefs 13, 49ers 10. Taylor Swift wins. something like that.
13 on purpose, right?
Exactly.
Taylor's favorite
all that.
number.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great time to be alive. This has been, we were going to wrap this up. This has been the LSU Sports Insider. Please subscribe to The Advocate. Go to theadvocate.com/subscribe. Please sign up for the LSU newsletter. That's at theadvocate.com/LSU newsletter. We are here every Monday and Thursday on YouTube, the LSU Tigers on NOLA.com channel specifically, where they're live. You can catch us after the fact if you don't catch us live. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever other finer podcasts are found. And as always, on Mondays and Thursdays, we are brought to you by Champion Wealth Strategies. Please go to championwealthstrategies.com and plan like a champion today. For the soon-to-be whacking balls around Scott Rabalais and the thankfully recovered Wilson Alexander, I'm Perryn Keys. This has been the LSU Sports Insider.